long before the rise of Lordran, before the gods ruled from the shining city of Londo, and long before humanity inherited the world, there existed an era so ancient that even the oldest legends remember it only in fragments. This forgotten period would later become known as the Age of Ancients, a time that existed before fire, before death, and before the very concept of change had entered the world. The world existed in a state without disparity, where opposing forces had not yet emerged. There was no light, and therefore no darkness, no heat, and therefore no cold, and perhaps, most importantly, no life, and therefore no death. Because these opposites did not yet exist, the world remained locked in a state of perfect equilibrium. Nothing changed because nothing possessed the ability to change. Time, as we understand it, appears to have held little meaning during this era. The universe existed in an endless present, neither moving toward a beginning nor approaching an end. Towering throughout this ancient landscape stood the Archtrees, colossal structures whose roots seemed to descend endlessly into the depths of the world, while their branches disappeared high above the clouds. Dark Souls never fully explains what these Archtrees truly are. Some interpretations view them as the literal foundations of the world, while others see them as symbols of permanence and stability. Whatever their true nature may have been, they formed the pillars upon which the Age of Ancients rested. Resting upon these enormous trees were the rulers of this primordial world, the everlasting dragons. Unlike the dragons encountered later in the series, these ancient beings represented immortality in its purest form. Their stone scales rendered them nearly invulnerable, and neither time nor decay appeared capable of affecting them. In many ways, the dragons embodied the very principles of the Age of Ancients itself: permanence, stability, and resistance to change. This distinction is important because the dragons were not immortal simply because they possessed extraordinary strength or regenerative abilities. Rather, they existed within a world where death itself may not yet have become a fundamental law of reality. Without disparity, concepts such as birth, aging, and decay may have been impossible. The dragons endured because the universe had not yet learned how to destroy what it had created. Their stone scales were more than simple armor. They represented permanence itself, a form of existence untouched by time and beyond the reach of mortality. This detail would later become crucial because the dragons were not invincible because they were dragons. They were invincible because of their scales. Once those scales could be pierced or stripped away, even the mightiest among them could fall. Surprisingly little is known about dragon civilization during this period. Unlike the kingdoms of gods and men that would emerge in later ages, the dragons left behind no cities, no monuments, and no records of their rule. The ancient legends show them resting silently among the Archtrees, almost as though they were part of the landscape itself, rather than rulers presiding over it. This raises an interesting possibility. The everlasting dragons may never have considered themselves kings or conquerors at all. They may simply have existed as the natural order of the world, ancient creatures inhabiting a reality that had never known ambition, conflict, or the desire for change. Unlike Gwyn and the civilizations that would follow him, the dragons had no need to build empires because there was nothing to gain and nothing to lose. Even their appearance reflects this idea. Their pale stone bodies and immense wings give them an almost statue-like quality, as though they were less living creatures and more primordial forces of nature. They feel as eternal and unmoving as the Archtrees themselves, guardians of a world suspended in perfect stillness. Because despite all its grandeur, the Age of Ancients was not necessarily a paradise. There was no suffering, but there was also no growth. No kingdoms rose beneath the Archtrees. No civilizations expanded across the world, and no great discoveries were made. The world was peaceful because it was motionless. Nothing could flourish because nothing could become anything other than what it already was. Throughout the series, rulers, gods, and kingdoms repeatedly attempt to preserve their own ages indefinitely, believing permanence to be synonymous with prosperity. Yet the Age of Ancients demonstrates the cost of such eternal stability. A world without change may avoid suffering, but it also sacrifices growth, discovery, and the possibility of something new. Eventually, however, this perfect equilibrium came to an end. Deep beneath the Archtrees, the first flame appeared, and with it came Disparity itself. For the first time, the world experienced light and dark, heat and cold, life and death. The universe that had once existed in endless stillness suddenly found itself capable of change. The arrival of the first flame did more than illuminate the darkness. It transformed reality itself and marked the end of the Age of Ancients. From that moment onward, the world would become defined by cycles of creation and destruction, rise and decline, fire and dark. Every kingdom that would one day stand in Lordran, every tragedy that would unfold throughout history, and every choice made by the chosen undead could ultimately be traced back to that single moment when the world discovered the existence of change. For the everlasting dragons, the appearance of the flame represented something even greater than the arrival of a new power. It represented the arrival of mortality itself. The creatures that had once embodied eternity now found themselves living in a universe that had learned how to age, decay, and eventually die. In many ways, the war that would soon follow was not simply a conflict between dragons and lords. It was a conflict between two visions of existence. One represented permanence, stagnation, and eternity. The other represented change, mortality, and the endless cycle of rise and decline that defines the history of Dark Souls. Hidden within the newborn flame, 4 great souls waited to be discovered. The Age of Ancients was ending. The Age of Fire was about to begin.